Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Four Corners Network, and this is Territory Talk. I am your host, Jon Punn. Unfortunately, today I am on my own. Chris Rex is under the weather, but rest assured he will be back with me once again when we film the Four Corners Network. But today we are talking about Tales from the Territory, and what they spoke about was Stampede Wrestling, Calgary's own, ran by Stu Hart. You know, and Stu Hart, when he started this, as the respectful man up north, a nice respectful company, rough on the edges, but there was no messing with Stu Hart. Stu Hart was the kind of man that, would stretch anybody at any time, at any given will, and nobody was able to get out of his stretches. Once you was locked in for good. So, sitting at this round table to talk about Stampede Wrestling, you had, of course, Stu Hart's son, Bret Hitman Hart. You had No Class, Bobby Blast. You had Dr. Schultz. Yes, David Schultz was definitely in this one, and Abdullah the Butcher. Now, these four men definitely all came up in Calgary, and they all got their start here. So these were the perfect four that sit at the round table. You know, to start off the round table, the four men, they all start talking about Stu Hart, putting the man over as a great businessman, starting this company, and bringing a lot of great superstars out of Calgary. And one story that stuck out to me was when Bret Hart talked about him meeting Stu Hart meeting his wrestling coach. And, Bret Hart's wrestling coach would always talk about how wrestling was fake, pro wrestling is fake, why you're doing this, why you're doing that. So, all Stu Hart did nonchalantly was start to conversate with him and lock him into an arm bar. Locked him in the arm bar and showing him, how fake this really is. And he's talking to him too at the same time while he has him in this nicely, calmly, respectfully, just talking to him. How does that feel? And it's just to show the kind of man Stu Hart was. He was calm, cool, collected, but he wasn't going to put down his sport. And you know how those real legit national wrestlers looked. Everybody didn't like it. Everybody thought it was fake. It shouldn't have been considered you know. So, one of the first people to come up in Calgary was Abdullah the Butcher. So, he talks about his start in Calgary with Stu Hart. Stu Hart always taking care of him and, always got along. But it was funny because when Bret Hart was young at this time, Bret Hart was still trying to separate the real and the fake of pro wrestling. And Abdullah the Butcher was actually wrestling Stu Hart. He had him outside the ring while Bret Hart is front row, punching him, biting him in the head. And what does Bret Hart do? Sticks his foot through the barrier and starts kicking Abdullah the Butcher. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. Abdullah the Butcher, not knowing who's kicking him, turns around, ready to destroy a fan or something, and sees little 10-year-old Bret Hart in the front row. The professionalism of Abdullah the Butcher to just not do nothing, turn around, and keep it on Stu Hart was just, it was just wonderful, But Bret Hart, was always then scared of Abdullah the Butcher, thinking that he was going to get beat up at any given time. He was still unable to separate the real and the fake until there was this guy, Archie, that, was another one that had a rivalry with Stu. And eventually, one day, he was coming over to Bret Hart's house to pick up his paycheck. Bret Hart, scared at the door, doesn't know what's going on. He's in the living room wondering why this guy is walking up to his house. And once his mom hands him the paycheck, that's when Bret Hart started to realize the real and the fake of the business. So now the next thing they talk about, Bobby Bass is there. And he talks about how he got his nickname, No Class. So he was working this tag match where there was this midget wrestler named Cowboy Lang. All right. And I think it ended up being something like a battle royal because he said there was multiple people in the ring. And Bob Bass drew this guy up into the rafters and pretty much into the ceiling and waited as he started to come down and then just backed away and not catch him. And that's when commentator Ed Whalen said, "Oh, that guy Bob Ash, he has no class." And then it just stuck with him. That became who he was everywhere he was. That was his, his gimmick. No class, Bob Bass. And I find that funny. He just let the midget fall to the ring. It's kind of funny. I guess it was kind of paying his dues in a way. You know, so like I said earlier, Stu was bringing in superstars from other territories. One of those was Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant came in, and this was supposed to be, something that was going to be long term. And, show went well, and it was time for, it was Bret Hart and Smith Hart that was driving Andre the Giant back to the airport. It was Smith driving, Bret in the passenger seat, Andre the Giant in the back seat of this Cadillac. He has 30 minutes to catch a flight, and now Smith Hart decides to, put the pedal to the metal, 120 miles per hour, flying to the airport. Almost to the airport, they start noticing that they're getting chased by police. Andre the Giant's in the back, flying around in the back seat, not enjoying himself. They drive up to the ramp of the airport. They get Andre in. Bret Hart stays in the passenger seat of the car. As Smith takes Andre into the airport, police roll up on him, guns out, drawn out in Bret's face. Bret gives out this sob story, which sort of was true. He didn't lie about, rushing Andre the Giant to the airport to help him catch a flight. And at that moment, Smith and Andre walk out of the airport, Andre steaming mad, and Smith goes, "His flight just left." The officers end up letting Smith go with just a warning, and they go on their merry way. After the officers witnessed Andre steaming mad, saying that his flight was missed. And I can't believe that they just got away with a warning. And at that time, that was it. Andre the Giant was so mad that he never wrestled for Stu Hart again, never spoke to anyone from the Hart family. Even when Bret Hart saw him later on, he just walked away from Bret Hart and didn't even acknowledge him. So, that left a heavy imprint on Andre the Giant to not go back to Stampede Wrestling. I don't know if I would have done the same thing in Andre's shoes. Just not come back to the territory. I probably would have gave Stu a second chance. Stu didn't know his son was, driving like a madman down Calgary. All right, so now next, we have Dr. David Schultz, who also, got his start in Calgary in Stampede Wrestling with Stu Hart. He was this, big heel, big time heel, always beating people with chairs, busting people open. And how wrestling was to all the fans. Wrestling is real. So, fans would wait in the parking lot with stones, trying to bash his car, trying to beat him up. He'll have to take people out, fight people out, because these fans always thought wrestling was real. Then there was a time after the matches where David Schultz was walking to his car in the parking lot, and he comes across a fan with a large rock, a large stone. Right? This fan decides to charge at him with a stone, and he pulls out a hockey stick. Who carries a hockey stick with them in their gear bag? David Schultz. But he pulls out a hockey stick, swings it like a baseball bat, and just knocks this fan senseless over and over with this hockey stick. And what was funny about the story is he said he still has the hockey stick at home. And that is, I would love to see that hockey stick, to see any like blood stains that may still be on that hockey stick. Then, then there was a plot that fans were going to kidnap his daughter and try to kidnap his daughter for ransom, to, I guess, maybe try to get David Schultz out of the business. I don't even know what the plan was going to be if they got her. But, it ended up not happening. But he kept his daughter closer. And that was crazy. That was crazy. You know, fans always, every territory, no matter where you at, fans believed whatever they saw. And that was, keeping that kayfabe. You know, no matter where they were, no matter what, every territory knew how to keep it. Now, David Schultz also, when he was new, ribs, they're part of the business, and when he was new, he had a rib plate on him. He left his coffee on his table. This is something, I'm afraid for Chris about because my best friend, he's that coffee drinker, man. He has a cup of coffee every morning, every afternoon, you know. So he leaves his coffee, goes to the bathroom, take a piss, wash his hands, whatever he's doing, and all the boys are still in the locker room sitting by that unattended cup of coffee. Schultz comes back, chugs down the rest of his coffee, and then he starts tripping. Like he's on acid, has a fucking trip, starts asking questions. I don't care what you put in my drink. I want to know how much of it you put in my drink. I don't even care who did it. I just want to know how much. And, nobody's answering. Nobody's responding. Everybody's acting like they didn't have nothing to do with it. So, what does Dr. Schultz do? Revenge. His wife is home baking lovely chocolate chip cookies. He decides to get some X-Lax, chops it up, breaks it up, bakes it into the X-Lax. Brings them to the show, but brings some of his wife's good cookies for him. So he's eating the good cookies. All the boys are eating the X-Lax filled cookies. He decides to play it off with the boys while they're all taking turns in the toilet, but it didn't get the effect that he wanted. You know, they all, he pretended to be sick, but nobody realized that he got them sick. So he went out and bought horse laxative. Put the horse laxative again into the cookie mix, bake these cookies, brings them to the show, and now everybody is running to the bathrooms with the fucking drizzling shits because of these cookies. And that's how you fucking rib somebody when they rib you. I love it. That was revenge well planned. Well planned. So, ribs, as I said, they were part of the business everywhere, every territory. And one rib that they had was something that they called the Demable Party. There was this one lady, when her husband was out of town, she would come to the shows, flirt with the wrestlers, you know, bring them back to her house for a party. They would start drinking. And there was this one guy, I remember that he said he was 500 pounds. He was a worker. And he was the one being that the rib was being played on. And Mabel, she would start flirting with him, rubbing his leg, drinking with him. All the other boys, all the other workers that were at this party knew that it was a rib, you know. And all of a sudden, while they're partying, the husband comes home, and he comes home with a shotgun. He sees what's going on, but the shotgun is filled with blanks, and he starts shooting the boys, and the boys all have ketchup packets, you know, pretending to be hurt, and they tell him to run, run. He runs out, runs through the front door, and runs through the weeds, the corn, the fields, and ends up getting the cops. He ends up coming back with the cops. He's shaking in the back seat. So when the cops entered, the cops knew that it was a rib because it was something that they constantly did with new workers that came into the territory. They brought them into these naval parties and just scared the living crap out of them. So it was actually something funny. Those ribs were crazy. I don't know if I would have want to be on the receiving end of those ribs back in the days. I don't know how I would have reacted. I don't know if my revenge would have been taken lightly. I don't know. I don't know if they would have taken me and my jokes as a rib. I think finally they started to go into, what brought down Stampede Wrestling and the territory in Calgary. And there was this one guy named Bad News Allen, who was supposed to be, the big heel coming into Calgary, coming into Stampede Wrestling. But he was the one that always took it too far. The commission would suspend him all the time. He would like to use a fork in the matches, start stabbing people with this fork, and over and over the commission would suspend him, and he would continue to use the fork. Then, as he would keep coming back, he would keep doing the same thing. And what started the ending was, as he was walking back to the ring from a match, there was a 90-year-old man at ringside who decided to punch at Bad News Allen. And what does Allen do? He actually attacks the fan back, lifting him out of his seat and beating up the old man. All right, he ends up getting suspended again, and getting Stu Hart's license revoked from that city. The following week, they went over to Edmonton, and again, he decides to use the fork. And as he's walking back to the locker room at the up the apron, he gets attacked by another fan. But this time, Bad News Allen goes way too far. He picks up a steel chair and repeatedly over and over starts beating the fan, inciting a riot. Stu Hart loses everything at that point. He loses his license. Big Bad News Allen wasn't able to wrestle in Canada anymore, and it was just pretty much the end of the territories. Stu Hart decides, I guess, to sell what was left of the company to Vince McMahon. He gives it over to Vince McMahon, and according to Bret Hart, who says this is true, but according to Bret Hart, Vince McMahon never paid him for anything of Stampede Wrestling. He ends up taking it back from Vince, opening it up for a little while, where people like Owen Hart started, and ended up closing again in 1989. And that ended up being the end of Stampede Wrestling. I think it was a great episode. Stu Hart was the type of man that, was always well, proper, respectful, rough around the edges, as I said at the beginning. But he did everything he can to keep his company, up and running until one man pretty much ended everything that he worked his whole life for. Now, next week, the Tales from the Territory is going to be talking about Polynesian Pro Wrestling, which we all know is big in Hawaii and the Noai family. So that is going to be interesting. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot of stomach-turning stories from that territory. So I'm looking forward to that. And hopefully by that time, Chris Rex will be back with me. I know you was probably bored listening to me for the past half an hour, 45 minutes. But once again, I do want to put us over. You can always find us above my head, Four Corners Net on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. They're all above my head. You can find me at Jon Punn on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Chris Rex at Rex Wrestles, at Rex Wrestles. He might not be here, but I'm going to plug him anyway. He would be right over there. I got it. That's everything. That's all the plugs. And as always, be excellent to each other and keep supporting pro wrestling.